and welcome back to my channel, where I'm going to cover the Bard's College of Lore, providing a brief description of the subclass as well as explain the setup of various features gained as this particular subclass levels. Bards of this college tend to want to know something about everything, spending time to collect bits of knowledge from any source they can get their hands on. This will include perusing through ancient tomes when they're accessible, or simply listening to the villagers talk about local knowledge and legend. They tend to use this information to craft elaborate stories in writ and song, and entertain patrons with the products of their trade, keeping them spellbound. The stories will always be grounded in truth, and this is where the loyalty of the bards of this particular college lay. That and the beauty of that truth. Now, some would argue that it's actually the pursuit of beauty itself, in a lot of ways, but I would argue that the beauty that's involved in this particular case leads to the truth in the end. So, that's where I see it going. They become masters of information gathering, and as a result will tend to be heavily involved in organizations like the Harpers or other organizations that use information to foster their goals. A player who likes to play a more artistic style of character blended in with the search for legends and lore will love this particular class. They can be useful characters when it comes to gathering information where brute force is not the right means and a lighter touch is required. And to help support this role, they gain more skill proficiencies than most characters, and learn how to use those proficiencies to cut the wick of any boisterous buffoon that might want to question their motivations. So with that, let's take a look at the features this class specialization gains as they level up. The first thing to note is that bards will acquire their class specialization at level 3. I'm going to drop this particular class into place and then select the College of Lore for this particular video. And then we're going to acquire all of the proficiencies and skills that we need and gain at level 3. The two features that we gain initially are called bonus proficiencies in specific to lore and cutting words. So let's take a look at these proficiencies and examine how they affect our character. The first one I'm going to look at is the bonus proficiencies. And specifically when you join this particular college, you can now choose 3 additional skills with which you gain proficiency in. So if you recall, when we acquired level 2, we acquired a number of skills here that we were now half proficient in. Now we can actually gain additional proficiencies. So I'm going to increase perception to full proficiency. I'm going to take investigation. And it's always tricky. Let's go with history. And that'll tie into the lore aspect of what we're looking at for this particular college. I just noticed that some of the stats here were off by quite a bit. Well, unfortunately, I had a very large number here, so I don't know where that came from, but I've corrected that particular value, so this should be now correct. We shouldn't have to worry about those strange values, so I apologize for that. With cutting words, you are now gaining the ability to interrupt, in a way, a particular type of roll from an opponent creature that you're focusing on. This creature has to be within 60 feet of you and has to be able to see or hear you. And what happens here is that when they make an attack roll their damage, or make an ability check, you can potentially make use of your Bardic Inspiration and one of your Bardic Inspiration die rolls and subtract the value you come up with the Bardic die roll against their use of that particular roll. So this has to be done before the Dungeon Master, in the case of an attack roll, indicates whether that attack has hit or missed. Additionally, this has to be done before the damage roll of a particular attack that has hit, or before you are aware of the effects of an ability check roll that a Dungeon Master has completed. Essentially, this means you have to make the decision before you know the outcome or the result of that roll as to whether you're going to make use of that roll and subtract a specific value from it. So this is not something that you get to see the roll before you make the decision. This is something that you have to decide before you know what the effects are. This is something you will be adding to your Actions tab. So I'm going to drop this into place and create a new grouping called College of Lore and set that aside for now. So how is this actually going to work within relation to Fantasy Grounds? Well, what you will do is you will indicate to the Dungeon Master that you're using this particular skill. Then you're going to go to your Bard grouping here and select your Bardic Inspiration and tick that. Then you're simply going to pick up a 1d6 die roll and roll it in the chat window to give the Dungeon Master a value they will be subtracting against whatever roll that they have made. That's one way. It's not the easiest way, but it's a doable way. Let's set up something for a little bit different, if we can. For the most part, whenever we have set up an actual skill or feature in here, we have been going through, let me just minimize that so we can see the screen here. We have been going through and adding a plus or positive value here. Well, there is another way that we can go through and set up this particular ability. We're going to go through and create an effect. We're going to call it cutting words. Oops, semicolon. And then we're going to do this, ATK colon minus 1d6 semicolon check CHECK colon minus 1d6 semicolon, and the final option is damage, so DMG colon minus 1d6. So you're noticing a trend here with the 1d6 value. Is going to be on the next roll of that particular creature, and it lasts, I believe, for 1 minute, if I'm not mistaken. 10 minutes, sorry. No, actually, this is going to be instant. So you shouldn't put an expiration because it's going to expire the minute somebody rolls. So this is going to complicate things a little bit more when it comes to Fantasy Grounds. If the Dungeon Master is making an attack roll, you're pretty much going to know right away as to whether that roll succeeds. So let's say we're in a combat situation, and let's say that let me open up the Dungeon Master screen here, that the succubus is attacking our expert here. So let me set up the succubus to be the active creature. They're going to target the expert, and at this point, you're going to say, I'm going to make use of cutting words. And the reason you're doing that is you're making the decision now before you know the effects of the attack roll. This would be when you would use it. So you would put this and drag it onto the succubus. Now when they make their attack roll, it will roll the 1d6 and decrement that value, which in this case was a -2. They didn't roll that great to begin with. But that's kind of the point. You don't know as to whether the effect of that roll was going to hit or miss when you're doing pen and paper. You do when you roll it within Fantasy Grounds. You can see right here that the result of that roll was a miss. Now that depends entirely on whether the Dungeon Master is sharing those results in the chat screen. I currently have Fantasy Grounds set up to do that. If the Dungeon Master is set up to hide those results, then this becomes a moot point, because you're not going to know whether that is a hit or a miss before the Dungeon Master declares it. But here's the thing, they've already made the roll, so it's a little bit more difficult to go through and actually add the 1d6 value to be subtracted from their result. A little bit of a add minus subtraction, whatever. So in that case, you're going to have to do this method. Because now they can just go and subtract this value from the result they see on the screen and tell you whether it hits or misses. Excuse me. This method kind of requires you to make the decision before you see the results, which means you kind of have to apply it before the Dungeon Master actually executes the attack roll. Now, let's say that you chose to allow the attack roll to go through. Well, now what will happen is you have the option to interrupt the damage. So before the Dungeon Master actually rolls the damage in the event of a hit, so let's actually re-roll that attack by the succubus. As we can see, there's no additional thing there, but this time they have hit. You can now go ahead and apply the effect on the succubus and drop that into place so that when they do the damage, the total amount of damage dealt is subtracted by the additional die roll that you saw in the actual chat window here. So you can see here that there's a bit of damage done. They are executing the now expired effect on their roll and subtracting whatever came up on that die roll to give us a total of 2. In fact, the total amount of damage was 4. So 4 minus 2 is the 2 that we got here because we rolled a 2 for the subtraction die. And that's how that would actually work for both of these particular situations. Well, what happens if they have to make a skill check? Notice this is not a saving throw. This is a skill check. Typically, in a combat situation, you might not have to be making a skill check, but if you have a party member like the expert sort of doing a strength contest against the succubus, that would suffice for a strength check. You could interrupt their quote-unquote roll before they actually roll the strength test. So you could apply the effect on the succubus, and then that succubus could attempt their strength check to see if they rolled a higher value than the expert did in, let's say they're holding a door together and they can't open it. That's how you can actually go through and do that. And that covers everything that we need to know for cutting words. At level 6, you gain additional magical secrets. So if you recall from the initial Bard video, one of the abilities that a Bard gains is magical secrets. And this is really around them gaining additional spells that don't count against their quote-unquote known spell list. So if we look at this particular skill here, they first gain this at level 10, but those of the College of Lore actually gain an instance of it at level 6. And what this allows you to do is to be able to choose any 2 spells from any class and give them to your character sheet in the action list here. Sorry for your spells. And they will not count against the total spell listing of spells that you know. So according to our table up here, we will know a total of 22 spells. Well, what happens in the case of the College of Lore is that the bards of this particular college actually will know 24 spells because they're gaining 2 additional ones here. No other class that I'm aware of anyway can actually have that number of spells known and prepared at any one particular point in time. Potentially a wizard, but I think that might be a hard sell. And that's probably a wizard who's maxed out their intelligence with as many magical items as they can make use of. This is what makes College of Lore bards extremely powerful, is they will be able to fling spells left, right, and center, and their only real limitation is on the total number of spells that they know. And actually, it now looks like our spell table has been fixed, so we don't need to worry about that. So how do you make use of this? Well, you can go choose any spell you wish from the list of spells that are made available to you through any of the supplements, as long as you know the level of the spell that you can cast. So in this particular character's case, we can choose 2 level 1 spells, 2 level 2 spells, 2 level 3 spells, or, and those are ors in between each of them, so 2 level 1 spells, or 2 level 2 spells, or 2 level 3 spells, or we can mix and match any combination as long as the total number of spells we choose is 2. The other option is you can also select them from your own list of spells that you can make use of, and that is here. But there's also something else that you have the ability to do, and that is additional bard spells. I don't know if this is new or not, but it is something that popped up after I had reloaded another module here. Yep, so I thought so. This comes from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So if you have Tasha's Cauldron of Everything here, and I'll just load this so that we have that particular table listing available, there are additional Bard spells that actually come through here and are now available to you. So I figured that was going to be part of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, but I'm not really ready to cover that as part of this particular video series. So I'm going to temporarily turn that off, just so that it doesn't affect too much. And we can get rid of that. In this particular case, I'm simply going to choose 2 from our current list of bards, bard spells. I'm just going to throw them into place. So I don't want a cantrip. Let's go for level 3, just for kicks. So Hypnotic Pattern, for instance, and Major Image. I could have chosen Fireball here if I really wanted to. So a bard flinging a fireball with a loot, that can actually be kind of hilarious. But that's everything we need to understand about additional magical secrets. At level 14, you will gain your last college specialization feature, and that is Peerless skill. In this particular case, you are now able to make use of your own bardic inspiration towards yourself. Now you might say, wait a minute, couldn't I do that before? No. Bardic inspiration is towards others, which means that you can never use bardic inspiration on yourself up until you get Peerless skill. And even then, the limitation is there for how you can make use of it. At level 14, whenever you make an ability check, you can now expend 1 use of bardic inspiration and add 1 die roll of bardic inspiration to add to that number. For a pen and paper option, you get the ability to do this before the results of the die roll indicate whether you succeed or fail. In the case of Fantasy Grounds, you can do that. It's a little bit trickier, but it is doable. However, I'm going to show you a bit of a convenience method for our Actions tab here. Drop this into place and add it to the College of Lore grouping here, which I'll expand again. So it's very similar to what we did for cutting words, except we're not going to be adding or subtracting a value. We're going to be adding a value. I'm going to add an effect here. We're going to call it Peerless skill, semicolon. And by the time we hit this particular level, I believe we should be at a higher value. So a 10th level, yeah, we haven't gotten to 15 yet. So it's a 1d10 at this particular level. So we should be modifying all of those. So check, it'll be 1d10. It is going to be on next roll, and it's going to be on yourself. You can't add this particular check to anybody else, because, well, you can. I mean, you could use your bardic inspiration. But this check is literally for you. Now what's going to happen is as follows. Using method 1, where you execute the skill check first, so let's say we're being asked to make an athletics check. We could roll this particular die, but before the Dungeon Master tells us whether that 9 is a success or a failure, we roll an additional 1d10 and add 2 additional points to that. Kind of a poor roll here. We then have to actually go through and tick off a use of bardic inspiration. Now I'm going to clear these just so that there's use and just add 1 back in. So this is how you would actually go through and do that if you were going to do it the way that the skill, or feature rather, recommends you do it. The other way that you can do this, and this makes use of the automation of Fantasy Grounds, is to state that you're going to actually use Peerless skill. So you tell the Dungeon Master you're going to use it. You then tick off a bardic inspiration point here, and then add this effect to your character. And that should, yeah, we see this here, Peerless skill. And you'll notice I didn't have the combat tracker open when I did this. It seems to work that way with the self option. Not always, but it sometimes does. I do believe you have to be in the combat tracker, though, even if it's not open. However, now when I go and actually make the skill check, see this one here, I have a negative 11. That seems a little high, but okay. I'm going to roll, and it will add 3 points to this overall roll. So why is religion a negative 11? Oh, there's a minus in there. Oops. I don't know where some of these mistypes are coming from, but in any event, I still managed to succeed. So, in this particular case, I managed a successful roll in this particular case, even with the 15. Chances are it was going to be a 15 skill check. But I added the +3 to that, ensuring that I did in fact roll and succeed on that particular roll. So that is how Fantasy Grounds would like you to make use of it. You don't have to do it that way. You can do it the other way. But if you want to be able to take advantage of the automation, it's best to have that queued up on your character before you actually execute your skill check. And having said that, that completes all of the features that are gained through this particular class specialization. As you can see, the Bard can become an extremely powerful character over time as they level up and progress through their feature sets. I've never personally played a Bard, but I have seen other players make use of Bards to great effect when it comes to gathering information, being able to inspire an entire party, as well as to, in general, just deal out a crap ton of damage when it comes to actual combat situations. They are also peerless when it comes to their skill checking capabilities because they literally become half proficient in literally every skill that they're not proficient in. And also gain all of the benefits and traits that a normal bard does when it comes to their lore collegiate, if you will. I think that's the right word. But in any event, no one can match the level of skill checks when it comes to a bard. I hope you have found this video informative, useful, and simplifies things for you when setting up your own character, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.